I'm going to first welcome you all. It is great to see all your faces on this session today. We're really excited to be with you and to have Felicia sharing with us. So I'm going to share my screen and let you know what's planned for today. But let me see to get it set up for you. All right. Are you seeing the one slide, Christine? No, you're seeing two, aren't you?
No, we're seeing multiple.
Here we go. How about now?
Good job.
All right. So, again, we welcome you all for being here. I am Caroline Gooden, the director of this wonderful project. Christine Hausman is here. She is our lead facilitator. Brandon Canada is working furiously behind the scenes. He does all things technology and Zoom related. Melinda Roark will be joining us later in the session. She does all things evaluation related. You've gotten many emails from Michaela already. If you are new to this series, this scope series today, you will have probably received an email from Michaela with some pre-series surveys for you to do. Everybody does 2 surveys at the beginning of this series. Juliet Souders is also here. She is our research assistant for scope, and she is one of our small group facilitators. And we also thank each of you who are our small group facilitators, and you, each one of our participants, for making this fantastic training happen. So just to review with you some of the topics and speakers, you can see these on the slide. I won't read them all to you. Today, we are delighted to have Felicia Bernhard with us. She is an occupational therapist from Ohio, and she's going to share with us about the sensory development of children with NAS. This is one of the most requested topics for this training series. Next time, on September 22nd, we will have Dr. Jennifer Grisham speaking with us about the developmental outcomes for children with neonatal abstinence syndrome. You can see the rest of the dates and speakers on those slides. You each got a copy of this introductory series of slides so that you can refer to it as needed. Christine.
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that we are regrouping. So we last time we did some group numbers, so now we're just going strictly by names this week. We're going to see how that works. So with our Southern Bluegrass, we have Sincere and Tammy. Tammy wasn't able to join us last week, so we're happy to have her. With our Two Rivers, we have our same fearless leaders there, Taylor and Sharon, as well as Amanda and Kristen. And again, there might be a chance based on numbers once Brandon kind of figures out who is assigned to which group that we might do some combining. So you may potentially make some new friends in your breakout groups today. Cumberland, we have Morgan and Glenna, and then again, Karen and Lynn in our northern region. And then on the next slide, we have folks from the eastern region. So we have Misty and Lloyd, Tanya and Juliet. Jefferson, Hans Peterson has been the leader, and he is on vacation this week. So I'm stepping in alongside Bridget. And then Salt River, we have Derby and Melissa. Melissa is actually also wearing 2 hats today. Not only is she a small group facilitator, but she will be sharing a child challenge with us today. So we're extra happy to have her here. And then Tanya and April are facilitating the Lakes region. So that is our crew of fearless leaders there. Here is our schedule, and it will look pretty similar to last week's schedule. So we're just kind of going over some of these procedures. This will become old hat to us pretty soon, but we just kind of, this first few weeks, we just kind of like to go over some of the procedural stuff. Then we'll get into our presentation, our expert session on sensory development. Then we will do our child challenge. And then we will have a half an hour in our breakouts today. So if there are some new faces, or if you want to do kind of an abbreviated introduction, feel free. But the bulk of the conversation will really be kind of diving into the child challenge. You will start with kind of one question, but as time allows, you can certainly explore some of those other questions. And then once the small groups are wrapped up after 30 minutes, we'll come back together with our facilitator, and Felicia will kind of hear some of our feedback and respond and kind of tie up the loose ends. And then we will be on our way, and time should probably move quickly today.
Thanks, Christine. So as she mentioned, this is Caroline again, and just to review some of the procedural reminders, some of you are new today, and we're glad to have you. We ask, and most of you have, that you put your first name, last name, and your agency in your Zoom profile so it shows up with your camera. We ask you to keep your cameras on. I know some of you are in public settings and can't have your camera on. We understand that. Appreciate that. Please enter your name and email in the chat every time you're here so we can give you credit for attendance. We will talk about some sensitive topics throughout this series, so we encourage you to take care of your needs, whatever that looks like, during these sessions. And we thank you for protecting the confidentiality of the children and families we'll discuss. We never use real names, and we appreciate that you protect their confidentiality. These sessions are designed to be interactive. We encourage you to actively engage so that we all learn, we all share together. You will see us using person-first language in recognition that we are all people first and people with conditions secondly. So we will say something like a child born with substance exposed, or a family who has a child with a neonatal syndrome, something like that. The sessions are recorded and closed captioned. You can turn on the captions if you haven't already with your Zoom controls. Feel free to ask questions anytime in the chat, and we will answer them as soon as we can. And just a reminder that this is a judgment-free zone. We respect all viewpoints of people that express all their different opinions here. All points of view are respected, and we welcome them to be shared. And lastly, reminders, we would love to have your child challenges on the topics that are coming up. Melissa graciously volunteered to bring us our child challenge today. We still need a child challenge for our next session on September 21st, when Dr. Grisham talks about developmental outcomes for children with NAS. So if you know of or work with a child who's anywhere between birth and 5 and can talk about some of the outcomes that this child has had, some of the progress they've made, we would love to have your child challenge. You can send that information to me or Christine. In the next few slides, I'm going to bring us back to the discussion we had last time about a child with NAS. So we're just going to summarize some of the great information that you all shared. If you remember, we talked about Annie, and we had talked about what is NAS in our last session. And you can see on this slide some of the strengths you all mentioned for Annie. She's born full term. She was treated with morphine before birth because her mother is in recovery. Her health is pretty good as an infant. It was interesting, some of the aha moments that you all shared, that white noise is a really helpful strategy for all children when they need calming or sleeping. And that is, as child care providers, we really have a powerful opportunity to model strategies that work with our families. Some of the strengths of families that you noted, there's a grandmother present and helping with the care of the children. The mother really has taken a lot of proactive steps to care for herself and her child. Some of the strategies that you all mentioned that would be helpful for this child and family. We want to educate the mom about safe sleep practices for sure. Back to sleep, we call that. Have baby sleep on their back at all times. Praising the mom for things that she's done well. Discussing programs and resources for her when she's ready. Again, suggested use of white noise, and consider the OT and PT for services to help with feeding as needed. Great strategies that you all mentioned. And then you came up with lots of resources that will apply to this case. I've got them all, we got them listed there. You probably will repeat some of these as we talk about our case today. This is a great list of strategies, resources that we can call on for all of our kids who have different kinds of needs. So great work on your discussion last time on how to work with Annie and her family. Some of the terms that you'll hear today, as Felicia talks, we're going to be talking about sensory modulation disorders. This means when kids have difficulty responding to the environmental sounds, sights, and tastes and touch. So if they have some trouble modulating the sensory input that they're getting. We have children who are sensory under responsive, meaning their responses to the environmental stimulation might be low. We also have children who are over responsive. They tend to be quite reactive in response to the stimulation in their environment. Sensory craving, you'll hear us talk about. Those are kids that want lots and lots of input. And Felicia will help us consider what we might do when that's the case. So those are some of the terms you'll hear today. Brandon's going to talk to us if he can. There he is.
Yeah, guys, so this first bulleted point here, this is our resource page where you will find things like today's slides. Once the recording is available, I will post that up there. You will also be able to find more information if you're seeking CEUs, materials that you might need to do that. Feel free to reach out to me. There's my email address with any questions, especially regarding those types of things or the technology of participating in Zoom or downloading the presentation or any other resources we've uploaded. Our Zoom link that you got on today, if you're here, then you have the right link and it will be the same one every week. And like they've mentioned, breakout rooms might be a little different week to week, depending on our numbers. So if you see different names and things like that, it's okay. But if you really think you're in the wrong place, pop back out and let me know. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. So I am now delighted to introduce you to Felicia Bernhard, who again is a licensed occupational therapist from Ohio. She can tell us lots more about what she does in her areas of strength. She works with the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, I believe. Felicia, you can correct me on that one. And she's going to talk about the development of sensory systems in children with NAS. And Felicia, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to you.
All right, let's hope that the technology gods are on my side today.
We can't quite hear you very well yet.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
There's a little baffle or something going on.
Let's see. How about now?
It's okay.
It's okay. Let's see.
If anybody's having trouble hearing, please give us a signal in chat. And Felicia, I'll monitor the chat. Yeah, they're still having some trouble hearing. I don't know what happened, Felicia. Go ahead, Brandon.
How's
just-
this?
Oh, nice.
Better?
Yes.
Yes.
Benefits of telehealth. I always have my mic with me. Okay. Let's see. Okay, and then I need to switch this. Let's see. Okay, remind me where I switch the.
Display settings.
It's up at the top left.
Why do I not see it?
See where it's, yeah, display settings, like Christine said. The next one over to the right.
Mine says mute. Why don't I? I saw. Oh,
Felicia, if you need, I can share it. If you, either way.
let's see.
On mine, it's up at the top left.
Felicia, try real quick just to stop sharing. Oh, here we go.
There you go.
Oh,
Got it.
You're good.
did something? It didn't. Well, it didn't work on my end.
It's looking good here.
Okay. Let me see. Eh,
Try your view too.
sorry about that.
Looks good from here.
Let's see. Back.
Time.
Well, I guess we'll just go for it. Does it still look okay on your end?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about sensory processing. And the title of this presentation is What We Know So Far. And the reason that is because when we're thinking about children who have been exposed to trauma or who have had a neonatal exposure, we really don't know as much as we would like to know. So we're going to dive into that today about what we do know. And my name's Felicia Bernhard. I am an outpatient occupational therapist at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. I primarily work in a developmental population, largely with kids with autism, kids with developmental delays, or kids with some extra social emotional needs. I don't have any disclosures at this time. So today we're going to talk about the definitions of what it means to be sensory under responsive, sensory over responsive, and sensory craving. We're going to talk about what those definitions look like in our kids. Definitions are great, but what does that behavior actually look like? And then we're going to talk about some treatment principles to address those extra needs. So today we are going to talk about this information from the STAR Institute. We're going to talk about Lucy Jane Miller's work. She wrote Sensational Kids, Hope and Help for Children with Sensory Processing Disorder. We'll also cover some information from the STAR Institute for Sensory Processing Disorder. And then I've also used some references from Kelly Mahler's work on interoception. So sensory processing is broken up into 8 sensory systems. So there's the 5 that we learn about in school. So touch, sound, sight, hearing, and taste. And then there's 3 more that you don't hear about as much unless you are hanging out with an OT. So the first one is your vestibular system. So this is your position and movement in relation to gravity. So the vestibular system lives in your eyes and your ears. So if I have anybody here that gets car sick or knows someone that gets car sick, usually what we do to help somebody, if it's not drive, if they get car sick, is to sit in the front seat or in the aisle so they can see the road. So their eyes are helping their ears, the fluid in their ears as that moves in the car, to kind of know where your body is in space. So if you close your eyes when you spin around, instead of having your eyes open, it feels a lot more intense. Then the proprioceptive system is input from your muscles and joints regarding where your body is in space. This is also your pressure system. And the proprioceptive system is our calming system. So if you've ever stubbed your toe or hit your funny bone, the first thing that we tend to do is to grab it and to apply pressure. That's just our knee-jerk reaction to calm that touch input that we feel from the stub toe or the hit funny bone. And then interoception is a newer concept that we're learning about and being able to work with kids and individuals on. But interoception is your internal sensations. So your feelings of hunger, pain, itch, body temperature, stress, anxiety, excitement, all of those feelings are interoception. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about sensory modulation. And Lucy Jane Miller in the STAR model referenced sensory processing disorder, but currently that is not a diagnosis that is in the DSM-5. And so Our work at Children's aligns with the DSM. So when we talk about a child that is having sensory processing difficulties, we use that language. So sensory processing difficulties, sensory processing challenges. We're not actually talking about a diagnosis. I also want to point out that a child can be sensory over responsive, under responsive, and or craving. You don't have you're not necessarily just one of those. All right. And then our kiddos that have had a traumatic exposure or exposure to a substance in utero typically fall in our craving category. So we'll talk more about that. So what is difficulty with sensory modulation? So individuals who have difficulty with with sensory modulation demonstrate a variety of challenges. So first is they have difficulty regulating input. The first, that means that a small amount of input can feel very overwhelming, or an individual may need a large amount of input for it to even register with the body. Another challenge is the difficulty obtaining the right arousal level for the right environment and activity. So arousal, you could also think of that word as an energy level. And so these are your kiddos who are on the playground and they've got high energy, and that's appropriate because they're outside. And then they come inside the classroom and they're still wild. And so now they're not at the appropriate arousal level for the environment and the activity that they're in. And then another challenge is difficulty adapting to challenges in daily life. So the vacuum cleaner turning on or a dog barking. So being able to adapt to different sensory information in the environment and being able to continue on. So sensory over-responsivity is when somebody responds too much, too long to sensory stimuli. So we've also heard this described as sensory avoiding or sensory defensive-ness. So a little bit of input is interpreted as a large amount of input. So kiddos that are sensory over-responsive can be easily overwhelmed with input. Sometimes they can become aggressive, irritable, fussy, moody, don't want to be touched. And our treatment principles for this is to raise our tolerance for input. So we want to help kids get regulated, stay regulated, and then we're going to teach them to tolerate whatever the input might be with activities that are slow and low intensity. And we're wanting to help the child maintain a calm and alert state. So an example of this could be a child that has a really hard time tolerating the touch needed to get a haircut or to have their teeth brushed or their nails trimmed. And so while we're working on that, we're not going to go straight in for the haircut. We're going to work up to it in a slow way that, you know, may not happen in an hour. And we're going to teach the child to be okay with that input while looking for a calm and alert state. So sensory under-responsivity is someone who's less sensitive and less aware of input. So these are kiddos that don't cry when they're hurt, or you don't know that they have an ear infection until you go to the doctor for a physical and they've, you know, got a raging ear infection and you had no idea. These kiddos may not know when you touch them unless they see you touch them. So if you tap their shoulder, they don't notice unless you're in front of them. They prefer sedentary or inactive activities. And the way that we're gonna kind of help get these kids regulated is we're going to go for high intensity activities throughout the day. So some activities we do here in clinic are like zip line and drop into a crash pad, or scooter board to knock foam blocks over, or do some jumping to put a puzzle piece in. So there's a high burst of an energetic activity, but it has a goal in mind. So sensory craving, this is the
Can I ask you a question before you go to sensory craving?
Sure.
I had a really good question from someone. Can they be both under and over responsive at the same time?
Yes, you can. So you can be over and under responsive, and I'll try to give you this scenario. So for touch, there could be kids that have a really hard time with hair cutting and nail trimming and teeth brushing, all of those grooming activities. So that would put them in the over responsive category. They're going to respond very big to that input. But then in the under responsive category, also for touch, they could be really touching. They want to touch everything, and they really don't notice unless like a tap on the shoulder would feel completely different than a hairbrush to the head, or hair clippers. You can also be over and under responsive or craving in each of those categories that we talked about. So all 8 sensory systems. Does that make sense?
Yes, complex.
Yes, it is. So, and throughout this conversation, working with an OT is always recommended. And that's the reason, because it takes a long time to figure out where does each child fit in, and it's going to change based off of where the child or the person is, if they're regulated or if they're not regulated. So if you think about when you wake up in the morning, for me, I don't want to talk on the phone first thing in the morning. I want to get up, I turn on a podcast, drink some coffee, kind of get my body ready for the day. If someone calls me at 7:30, that already puts me in a higher arousal situation. When that's okay, in the middle of the day. But then if you think about, like, okay, all of my patients came today and it was just a hard day for everybody. We were crying, we were falling down. It's just a really loud, hard day. My tolerance for input that would normally be okay, like a hug or other loud noises, is probably going to be reduced than if I had a really calm day at work. So what we can and cannot tolerate is kind of fluid. Okay, so for craving, so our kids with exposure tend to fit into the sensory craving category. So sensory craving looks like someone who just needs more and more and more input. These kids will really look for control of situations. They interrupt and have a hard time waiting. They might be impulsive, quick to anger, have explosive or big responses. They don't have a lot of sensory safety awareness. So they might be climbing and jumping off of things, not notice that they're, on the edge of a climbing gym. These kiddos are often intense and hard to calm down, and they're constantly on the go. Lots of caregivers will say it's It's like they are on a motor, like they could just go, 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 go until they drop. And the important thing about sensory craving is the more input that you put in to a craver, the more input they're going to want. So these kiddos like to roughhouse. They're constantly touching objects and people. They often have poor personal boundaries. And this used to be called sensory seeking, but the terminology shifted because we're learning that sensory cravers don't need more input. So the language there was kind of tricky. So it's shifted now to sensory craving instead of sensory seeking. So some treatment principles for sensory cravers is to know that they are not over or under aroused. They don't need more input. We want to give structured movement to make it purposeful and functional. So sometimes cravers will really seek out spinning, and that they never get enough. And so instead of just letting that child spin until they're content, maybe we do ring around the rosy. And so we spin while we're singing and then we all fall down. So that's an example of way to take a movement that a child is looking for and turn it into something that is purposeful and functional. We also want to teach awareness of the difference between a low arousal and a high arousal. So I teach my kiddos a fast body and a slow body, and also when we should have a fast body and when we should have a slow body. So some of the language that I'll use is like, oh, wow, it looks like you have a fast body. Our puzzle is a slow body activity. So let's find some ways that we can help our body slow down. And I like fast body, slow body better than calm down. Because if you think about yourself, I know for me, in the history of ever being told to calm down, that's never actually helped me calm down. So slow down just, I think, feels a little better. And then we also want to incorporate heavy work with interruptions. So heavy work is motor work that is engaging your muscles. So we want to do stop-start activities. So hop to get a puzzle piece and then return back to the puzzle board, or have the child help you stack chairs in the classroom. Let's see. Okay, and so so more ideas are to incorporate resistance movement, not just free movement. So having resistance bands on the chairs in your classroom or on the dining room table, having the kiddos stretch resistance bands while dancing, or sitting on a big yoga ball and leaning back to get a puzzle piece and then doing sit-ups to put the puzzle piece into the board. A lot of kiddos who are looking for extra proprioceptive input really like compression, like tight hugs, or squeezes, or like to fit in small places like the space between the wall and the couch, or in a little like cubby or a closet. If you're providing any kind of deep pressure or compression, the individual definitely needs to feel safe with that person. It's usually not something I just go right into. And then we can always work on having the child help you in the classroom. So stack chairs, bring the blocks from one center to the other, collect all of the books from, all the other students. We also want to keep in mind that we don't want to take recess away. We just need to know that this isn't going to necessarily help the child stay organized. It may actually be disorganizing. And so we want to have a structured calming activity between recess and heading back into the classroom. So, it's time to line up, and maybe we're going to hop all the way to the classroom, or we're going to tiptoe, or we're going to do like head, shoulders, knees, and toes really fast. And then we're going to progressively slow it down. And then setting limits, creating boundaries, and then providing opportunities to be successful at following simple directions is really important. A lot of times our kids are redirected for the things that we don't want them to do. And we really want to offer praise for doing calming activities and following the directions that we do want them to do. So this chart breaks down the threshold model, which is that over responsivity, under responsivity, and then the craving. So when you're over responsive, you have a low tolerance for input, and the goal is to raise the child's tolerance with slow activities that have low intensity. In sensory under responsivity, the children have a high threshold for input, and the goal is for us to lower their threshold with fast activities that are really intense. And then, as we talked about, sensory craving doesn't fit into this model because the more input you give the child, the more they're going to want. I think this photo really captures the threshold model really well. And so if you're under responsive, we want to fill the cup up. And if you're over responsive, we're wanting to empty the cup. But a sensory craver, the cup has a hole in it. So no matter how much movement you give a craver, or touch, or opportunities to make sounds, whatever it might be, the more that you give them, the more that they're going to want. So just to kind of start to wrap up, some findings from experience. Our children who've been exposed often live in sensory craving. These kiddos don't respond to the threshold theory of practice. So much of what is known about sensory treatment doesn't necessarily apply to this group. And it's really important to remember that the child doesn't need more movement, they need organized movement. We want to start with setting limits, following rules, simple one-step directions, and really setting the child up for success. And our kiddos are often redirected for unsafe behaviors and need constant reminders. So it can be really helpful to give the child an opportunity to get praise for something that's calming. And this is going to be different for every kid. So that is a huge thing when you're working with your child, is, sometimes hiding. Having a slow down spot is really calming, a spot to go play with stuffed animals or read books. Sometimes it's a touch activity like Play-Doh. Sometimes it could be like singing songs, something that starts out really fast, like a quick head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and then you're slowing it down to kind of help them also slow down. And then some key strategies. So incorporating the children into the classroom, incorporating muscle work so that it's not just free movement, and then building in opportunities for praise, and then organizing movement. Circle time or transitions are a great time for this. And then before I open it up for questions, I want to lead you through one of my favorite activities. So if you could all just take a moment to close your eyes, and I want you to think about all of the sensations that you are experiencing right now. Okay, so I am going to talk you through some of the sensations that I am feeling right now. So I can feel my headset on my head. I can hear my computer fan, and I can hear the air conditioner. I can feel my tongue resting in my mouth. I can feel my feet crossed. I can feel the clothes on my body and my body in the chair. I can feel that my hands keep wiggling, and that my body is really wanting to swivel in this chair. The reason why I like this quick activity is that most of the things that I pointed out are likely things that you noticed once I said them, or once you took a moment to completely slow down and pause. But your body filters those out um, right off the bat. And for our kids, that's not always the case. I did this with someone and they were like, oh my God, now I can't stop feeling my tongue. How do you make that go away? The good news is you'll probably forget about it in just a couple minutes. Your body will filter that out. But I think that's a good activity to realize that all of our different sensory processing experiences are different and can be different throughout the day. So I am going to open it up for questions as long as I have time.
And we've got, can you see the chat? I can read you the one question that's there if you want.
Let me see. Okay. Is the organized movement always necessary? There are incredible adaptive toys like spinning chairs that seem to help while building independence. What are the dangers or the movements not being organized? So the dangers of the movement not being organized is that we're going to continue to see that energy level rise, as opposed to when we get organized movement, it's going to help the child find that just right energy level. And a benefit to the organized movement is a lot of times our kids that are sensory cravers, they're super energetic. They seek out a lot of movement. They may be pretty coordinated, but you might be surprised that the organized movement is a lot harder. And sometimes there's some muscle weakness in there that we need to also work on. The spinning chairs, is that, do you mean like the sit and spins, or just like the rolly chairs that allow for movement?
Yeah, there's some professional like chairs for kids that are not, they're better than the sit and spin. They're actually like medical grade.
Okay. I haven't seen those, but I think if those, if that in particular works for the kiddo, what you're really looking for is that we get the movement and then we get enough and can move on, or are in a state where we're at the just right energy level for the task.
Okay, wonderful. Other questions that folks want to raise?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Okay, I have a new little boy in my classroom. I've only known him for about 2.5 weeks. And he does seek attention quite frequently, where he has a rough touch. Sometimes he touches me on different parts of my body to get my attention. He calls my name constantly throughout the day just to even just come see what he's doing. And I always just assumed it was because maybe the previous place he was at, he didn't get enough attention. And because I give him a lot of positive reinforcement and praise, that he's seeking my my acceptance or appreciation for what he's doing. But I looked at the checklist that she was showing, and he does put a lot of pressure. He does move quickly. He is very loud. When he's playing in sensory activities, he's usually pushing or slamming it. So I was thinking, well, maybe he is sensory craving. But then I was thinking, how do I acknowledge him, but also put limits if me keep acknowledging him keeps causing him to want my attention even more and more and more.
So go ahead. Sorry.
So I was thinking, should I focus more on maybe this is a new behavior, or maybe because his last child care providers were very young, his dad said, and he was constantly in trouble and they couldn't help him make good choices. And it was so frustrating for them. And at our school, he does have some concerns, but I'm able to redirect it or help him be successful. So was he having sensory craving issues at his previous place and he never caught it and just assumed it was bad behavior? Or I don't know what to do. Sorry.
So it could be. So a lot of times, some extra sensory needs can just look like a child that's not acting in the way that we want them to. So some ideas that might help your student could be teaching, kind of teaching some rules. So like you can touch Miss Felicia right here. This lets her know that you want my attention. So and showing the difference between like a gentle tap and like a hard tap, and actually like explicitly teaching the difference between like a soft touch and a hard touch can help kids with sensory modulation. It might also be helpful if you can catch him before he wants your attention. So to walk up behind him and I always try to model the energy level that I want my kiddos to have. So like, oh, Tommy, I see that you're playing Legos. You're doing a really nice job, and just giving like a soft touch, to the back. Good job. Keep going. And always kind of responding back. So if he responds in a really loud voice, you kind of stay even and keep a softer voice.
Perfect. Because I have to be honest with you, for my coworkers, they find him sometimes overwhelming. But for me, I can adjust and I can help him a lot. And I talk through, what he's doing or what he's feeling, or I give him suggestions, or I try to problem solve. But sometimes I feel like they think that I'm feeding into his behavior, and maybe that's what's causing him to continue. But at the same time, I want to support him and help him the way I can.
Absolutely.
So I just didn't know if there was like an even balance. Should I walk away more often? But I think I'm going to try what you said. And when I see that he is engaged in something before he has an opportunity, I will seek him out.
Yeah. I wonder if you kind of catch him being good, and then, and I wonder about sometimes in the classroom that I provide services in, we'll do like our good morning song really fast or really slow or really loud or really quiet, and then teaching what fast means, what slow means, what quiet means, what loud means. And that might help him to also learn like, oh, well, I can go, ask my teacher to come over here with a quiet voice versus a really loud voice.
Felicia,
Perfect.
these are awesome questions. Thank you, Susan. I'm going to encourage you all to, if you have more questions for Felicia, because these are excellent, enter them in the chat. When we come back together after your small groups, please raise them again with Felicia. We're going to switch now, Felicia, if you want to stop sharing, and I'm going to introduce Melissa, who will bring in the Child Challenge. Melissa, are you here?
I'm here.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. Good to